Hello and welcome back. Today, we will finish our tour of the psychology of eating system by discussing ways to shape our environments for better weight loss success. Although the topic of environment effects comes at the end of our class series, it would be a grave mistake to believe that these effects are of lesser importance than the topics that we have discussed previously. In a prosperous country like the U.S., you and I are subjected literally every day to an incredibly diverse set of influences on our eating and exercise decisions. These influences come from our homes, our social networks, television and social media exposure, the places that we work, stores where we shop, restaurants where we eat, among many other sources. The challenging part of environmental influences is that their effects on us are mostly invisible to the naked eye. We rarely notice them, even when their effects on us are strong. The fact that our environments shape how we eat, exercise, and live, mostly beneath our conscious awareness, is both what makes them potentially very dangerous to our weight loss efforts and very important to consider if you want to develop an effective plan for long-term weight loss. This slide shows the topic that we are covering today, as well as listing all of the important topics that we have covered so far in this Psychology of Eating series. The author Charles Dickens once wrote that, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." Although Dickens published this famous line back in 1859, it remains just as true today in some ways, particularly for weight loss. You see, on one hand, we enjoy incredible resources for improving our health today. For instance, the vast nutrition information that we have at our literal fingertips, the support we receive from our government and from research, the large number of cheap and convenient ways we have to be physically active, track our activity and food goals, and share our improvement efforts with others through social media. It truly is, in at least some respects, the best of times for losing weight and being healthy. But it is also the worst of times. Researchers refer to today's American society as an example of an obesogenic environment, referring to the many ways that modern America promotes overeating and underexercising. Compared to generations before, for example, we were surrounded by many more restaurants, are exposed to much greater amounts of food advertising, live more sedentary lives both at work and at play, and interact increasingly with friends and family who are themselves overweight and inactive. The combination of these environment effects is devastating to many people and makes this indisputably the easiest time in history to become overweight and clearly the most difficult time in U.S. history to lose weight. Because there is no reason to believe that our environment effects are going to get any better, in fact, all of the data suggests that they will only get worse in the years ahead, we have to assume personal responsibility for change and develop strategies that will allow us to succeed even in the face of an environment adverse to good health. If you underwent testing with a neurologist, a doctor that specializes in the brain, they might have you complete an MRI to obtain an image of your brain. This test would almost certainly show that you have a single brain. However, if you underwent testing with a neuropsychologist, a doctor that specializes in the operations of the mind, their testing would show very clearly that you in fact have two minds. One of these minds of yours works quickly, using habits, heuristics, reflexes, instincts, and emotional impulses to guide behavior. Our second mind works more slowly, using deliberate thinking and problem solving. Although we tend to think of ourselves as our conscious and deliberate mind, the truth is that our conscious self is more like the tip of a vast iceberg, made up primarily by our unconscious minds. These two minds operate and often conflict in every area of our lives, including our eating and exercise choices. If you've ever thought, for example, "I know what to do, so why can't I do it?" Or wondered why your willpower is so weak and unable to resist temptation, this is the result of your powerful unconscious mind influencing your behavior. A key theme that we are exploring today is to develop strategies that reduce the conflicts between your conscious and unconscious minds, and instead get them working together more often. It turns out that there are many ways to turn your unconscious mind into an ally for your eating and exercise goals, and instead of letting it remain an enemy. Most people greatly underestimate the complexity of their eating and exercise choices. Let me give you an example. Imagine the last time that you had breakfast at home, perhaps as recently as this morning. How many decisions were involved in your meal? Our tendency is to chunk events like meals into boiled-down descriptions such as, well, I had a bowl of cereal and a glass of milk. But let's rewind the tape for just a moment and consider just how many choices you made. For example, you had to decide what to eat. You may have had many breakfast types of foods available in your home from which to choose. You similarly chose how much to eat, in what container, with what sized utensil, what to drink, how much to drink, in what size glass, how fast to eat, where to eat, with whom to eat, what you might have also done while eating, such as reading or watching the news. When you stop to think about it, you made dozens of little decisions just in the simple task of eating breakfast. Isn't it amazing that you probably made all of these decisions almost instantly and with almost no effort? However, it is also a little scary to realize how easy it is to make bad eating decisions when we make our eating decisions without any deliberate thought. Realizing that we go through our days making many of these rapid choices about eating and exercise, some that have profound long-term effects on our lives, it becomes clear that we need to set ourselves up to become better decision makers. To set the stage here for most of the slides to come, let's define a microenvironment as a discrete part of your overall living environment where you make eating and exercise decisions. The combination of home, work, commuting, shopping, and restaurants represents the microenvironments that are most common to people. It is important for us to talk about microenvironments because this allows you and I to develop specific strategies for our individual circumstances. A person, for instance, who works as a traveling salesman has an entirely different set of environmental challenges than does a person who works at home or who spends much of their day taking care of children. When talking about improving our environments as a way of promoting better weight loss results, it is critical that we identify the particular obstacles and the resources that we possess, rather than trying to implement generic advice. Here's a funny idea to consider for yourself. The environment that you are in, whether it is a classroom, your home, school, a church, it's talking to you. Your environment communicates to you about what is important, what you should feel, and also what you should do. It is fair to say that your environment is offering you a continuous series of suggestions about how to behave. And these suggestions definitely include information about eating and exercise behaviors. Because we tend to spend a lot of time in our homes, the home environment is the single strongest source of environmental influence on most people. Now, it might seem obvious that we should set up our homes to be a good influence on our health behaviors, but this isn't obvious at all in practice based upon the often haphazard ways that people actually set up their home environments. Without realizing it, we often turn our own homes into the enemy of our health goals by setting up the environment so that it is convenient to make bad decisions and hard to make good decisions. Let's look at some ways to reverse that pattern. As we discuss the strategies on this slide, I want you to imagine yourself going home today and redesigning the environment so that your home helps you to become healthier and happier. Some of these strategies are self-evident. For example, putting the low-quality foods in your home either out of sight, in small quantities, or even keep them out of the home entirely if needed. The research is clear that eating and drinking with smaller plates, bowls, and utensils can help us to control portion sizes. In the same way that you keep low-quality foods out of sight, you want to make it as easy as possible to choose a high-quality food instead. Having a fruit bowl, for example, in which you actually keep fruit. Keeping your refrigerator and cabinets stocked with nutritious food options, and developing habits to cook healthier foods once or twice a week at least and store them for easy use later. Some of the other strategies are subtler in how they help us. For instance, keeping visual reminders of your health goals posted in places that you see them regularly around the home. Selecting artwork that inspires you towards your goals. Placing old athletic trophies, old photos of yourself in good shape or in interesting places, and other kinds of primers in your home environment. The intent of these is for them to work like positive advertisements, such as we discussed in our former class on motivation, to help keep your health goals on your mind even in the face of the many distractions in your life. Most people don't see an obvious connection between a clean home and a healthy body, but messiness is a source of stress, and stress leads to poor decisions and often to emotional eating. Keeping a neater home, from a biological perspective, acts a little bit like an antidepressant in keeping the neurotransmitters in your brain in a pattern that promotes more positive emotions. Finally, think about how you can make it easy to be physically active by, for instance, keeping your exercise gear easily accessible. Think, for instance, keeping your shoes and your athletic gear right by the door rather than having to rummage for them. Exercise in a regular routine and stick to that time, and actually protect some time in your schedule to do it. Having to spend a lot of time or effort to engage in exercise will often cause you to skip it, because you often won't feel like it, at least at the beginning, and that feeling will easily talk you out of exercising if there are also environmental barriers to getting started. Here are a few visuals that illustrate some wisdom and practical applications towards your home environment. Keep in mind when thinking about how to improve your home environment that pictures usually have a more powerful effect on our emotions than do words, and also usually require less focus or attention to have an effect on us. This is why, for instance, food advertisements on television tend to emphasize characteristics such as how a food looks and how it is packaged, with the ingredient details and a barely readable font size on the back. In the bottom right image on this slide, consider a before and after type transformation of your home where it became a neat and organized environment that inspired better health habits on your part. Here is a final set of home environment changes that refer to ways in which you can set up better home routines. For instance, designate an eating area in your home, rather than the all too common practice that many people have where they eat anywhere and everywhere in their home. You may recall from our discussion of food conditioning from a previous class that everywhere you eat in your home gradually takes on the ability to prime feelings of hunger in those situations and those locations. And it might seem obvious, but setting ourselves up to feel hungry all over our homes is not exactly a smart strategy. Secondly, develop a morning routine for yourself where you review some of your health and fitness reminders, such as placing them in the bathroom mirror or in the bedroom when you're getting dressed. Thirdly, cut out the common but harmful routines from the morning that generate negative emotions, such as oversleeping, watching the news, and managing social media. Let's next focus on improving our eating environment at places such as work and school that are also a big part of many people's days. Once we leave our homes, we tend to have less control over other environments, but this does not mean that we do not still have many options to improve our weight loss results. As we discuss some of the types of environment strategies applicable to work and school types of settings, keep in mind that there are big differences between one person's workplace or school and another person's. This means that we need to think flexibly about how to apply certain strategies rather than thinking about them in too concrete a manner. Let's face facts. Most work environments are not designed for health. They are designed for automobile parking rather than walking, convenience and snack food rather than for high-quality meals, and for ease of access through elevators and escalators rather than for taking the stairs. It is unrealistic to think that our workplaces will ever prioritize our health. Instead, you and I must take the leadership role and implement our own changes. One of the most powerful changes to make at work is increasing the quality of foods that you have available by bringing your own. Bringing your own food is much cheaper than buying food at work or eating frequently at restaurants, and is by far the best way of controlling quality and portion sizes. The most common obstacle to brown bagging is that it takes some time to prepare and package foods from home, and some people have limited options for storing food at work. But these are almost always solvable problems. There are, for example, many higher quality food options that you can buy pre-packaged, such as small containers of Greek yogurt, fruit, and salads, and many others that are made in larger portions at home, but they can be stored in small Tupperware containers. Personally, I do all of my main cooking in a couple of hours on the weekend while I am doing chores or reading. making items such as my lean meats and sweet potatoes, cooking chili in a crock pot, all of which can then be easily stored and carried in small portions to work. Now, when at work, you want to set up your work area to minimize your exposure to food cues such as snacks or candies, and to similarly increase cues about your health and personal goals, such as on Post-it notes, your desktop screensaver, or perhaps in your work calendar. This might include your exercise goals, an inspiring quote, poem, or picture of something that motivates you. When you are at work, look around for a place to eat, such as at lunch or breakfast, or a snack that is quiet and relaxing. And try to eat with people that are the same type of health-oriented person that you are now working on becoming. Share your health goals with coworkers and form partnerships that are with people that are also trying to make similar improvements. A final handy strategy for improving the workplace or school environment is to reliably wear some sort of an activity tracker that you can use to set exercise goals and to monitor your progress. Getting 5,000 to 10,000 steps of walking a day can seem like a lot, especially when you feel like you have to get them all at once. But you can often break this up throughout the day by taking multiple brief walks at work, taking the stairs, parking further away from your workplace, or going for a stroll at lunch. The fact that we must discuss your car as a microenvironment for your eating is a reflection of the modern American lifestyle that includes more commuting than at any time in our history. The increasing time that we spend commuting creates challenges both for our eating and our physical activity goals, and the more time that we spend commuting from place to place, the larger these challenges become. The most extreme examples are people who work in driving professions, such as truck drivers, taxi drivers, and increasingly people who work as drivers for entities such as Uber and Lyft. Compared to the general population, obesity rates are higher among people in these driving professions, and exercise rates are lower. Perhaps worst of all is that when your lifestyle includes a lot of time commuting, you can feel trapped, lacking the time or options to become healthier. Thankfully, this is not as true as it might seem, but it certainly does mean that if you spend hours driving or commuting each week and eat during these periods, that you definitely need to apply some better strategies if you want better results. Most of the strategies to improve the commuting environment come down to better preparation. Without realizing it, we fall into commuting routines that don't give us the time or the flexibility to do anything other than stopping at a drive-thru, eating processed food and drinks, and eating in a rush. Consider adding just 15 minutes into your schedule, either the night before or the morning of, to lay out your food in advance, to eat something either before you leave or once you arrive at your destination, and to keep a cooler, perhaps with some ice, to store quality foods in your vehicle if you will be driving for a long time instead of stopping at a fast food restaurant or a convenience store. If you leave home even just a few minutes earlier, you have time to park further away or otherwise take a walk. You can also think about shopping smarter as a commuting strategy so that you buy portable foods that can help you to reach your health and weight goals while driving, or that you can prepare at home and bring on your commutes and containers. Making these kinds of changes work, but they also take some time to develop into a new routine. I've met some of those notoriously unhealthy truck drivers, for instance, often spending 12 plus hours a day behind the wheel, but who were determined to improve and who lost weight, became fitter once they started focusing on their potential solutions instead of their own. Another of the important microenvironments for people is the grocery store. The way that we eat at home is largely a reflection of the foods that we have brought home from the store. That means that we need to become very selective about the foods that we bring home, and it turns out that this is a lot harder than most people think. It is fair to describe the modern grocery store as a type of wolf in sheep's clothing. Grocery stores are generally neat, organized, spacious, and welcoming. However, all of these qualities are more to their benefit than to ours. As innocent as the act of grocery shopping may seem, you are stepping into a food psychology gauntlet every time that you enter, subjected to a carefully calculated set of environmental factors intended to influence your shopping habits in certain ways. Unless you become aware of these hidden forces and apply strategies to resist them, you are very likely to fall prey to them. If you were a military general looking to conquer a territory, wouldn't it be wise to have a map of the geography before you sent in your troops? When it comes to conquering the grocery store, we do have a map, and it generally looks about like the image you see here. In a typical store, the fresh foods and the non-processed foods are located on the outskirts of the store, whereas the pre-packaged and mostly processed foods line the aisles in the middle. There are some important exceptions to this, such as frozen vegetables, yogurts, and Greek yogurts that commonly appear in the middle aisles, but as a general rule, this map applies well enough to help us. A simple rule to improve your food shopping is to spend the majority of your time on the outskirts of the store and away from the middle aisles filled with brightly labeled processed foods. When you go to the grocery store, go in prepared with a grocery list instead of shopping at random. The shopping list strategy improves your focus and gives you a goal, helping you to resist things like tempting sales on low-quality foods that you'll almost always run into in stores if you were just roaming around shopping. Now, some people feel bad if they pass up a sale because they feel like they are potentially wasting or losing money. However, you want to remember that there are always two costs to the foods that you buy. There is the short-term cost at the cash register, and then there is the long-term cost on your health. Is the so-called deal on a low-quality food really worth the price that you're going to pay later? Another helpful rule to remember and follow in the grocery store is to never buy a packaged food item without first reading the nutrition label on the back. The labels on the front of most food packages are often misleading and frequently don't mean anything like what you might think they mean. For example, a food labeled light probably refers to its color or to its scale weight, not to its caloric content. Labels such as healthy and vitamin fortified are often just as misleading. Far more accurate is the nutrition label on the back of the package, where you can see the intended portion size and the nutrition information. Reading the nutrition label usually takes just a moment and gives you an opportunity to learn more about what you are eating and to apply this knowledge to get better results. The last strategy here for grocery shopping concerns when you shop rather than how or where. This refers to what might seem like a common sense strategy to not shop for food when you are hungry. Being in a state of hunger changes how we think. The research shows that we are more vulnerable to food advertising when hungry and are particularly drawn to high-calorie, quick-energy foods when in this state. If you shop in the morning, do so after breakfast. If you shop in the afternoon or evening, do so after lunch or dinner, not before. Modern restaurants have nearly perfected the art of food psychology. To an unprecedented level, restaurant environments are set up to take full advantage of our basic desires for taste, convenience, large portions, and cheap prices. Americans eat outside the home more than ever, with a typical person eating at restaurants at least 2 to 3 times a week. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. The range of foods that we can enjoy at restaurants in the 21st century is remarkable and a reflection of the prosperous times in which we live. It is also true that you can eat at restaurants regularly and still manage your weight well. It is not necessary to go to extremes and think that you must choose between good health and eating at restaurants. That said, it is absolutely true that you and I must become smarter and more skillful about our restaurant eating if we are going to be successful. If the modern grocery store is a gauntlet, then the modern restaurant is a minefield, filled with caloric traps to catch the unwary and the inattentive. Let's set a goal of becoming an educated and skilled consumer when it comes to restaurant eating and discuss ways to navigate these environments successfully. Balancing restaurant eating with your health and weight goals begins before you get to the restaurant by using strategies such as choosing restaurants with quality food options, thinking about your order before you arrive, and by being more selective about who you go out with to eat. Going to an all-you-can-eat buffet with your biggest eating friends and no plan other than to get your money's worth is a recipe for disaster. With so many restaurants available, what are some options where better quality food options and portion sizes are available that you could still enjoy? Isn't your health and weight goal worth a few minutes of your time to research and look at a restaurant's menu online before you go, rather than trying to make a good choice once you get there and are confronted with the many tempting alternatives? Are there other non-food-based activities that you could do with your big eating friends, allowing you to go out to eat with friends that are at least a little more concerned about their health? Once you arrive at the restaurant, there are additional environment strategies for you to consider. For example, consider sharing an entree with one of your eating partners. If you are getting an entree yourself, request a doggy bag for half of it at the start of the meal, rather than waiting until the end when there will probably be nothing left to take home. And finally, intentionally eat slower, putting your utensil down between bites or taking a drink of water between bites if needed. Today, we took an in-depth look at the hidden but powerful effects that our physical and social environments have on our health habits and our ability to manage our weight effectively. Our environments are constantly communicating with us on an unconscious level, sort of like subliminal messages, nudging us towards certain types of decisions about eating and exercise. When you appreciate that each of us is being influenced all day long by our environments, it makes sense that we should do everything that we can to become more aware of these influences and to implement strategies to tip these influences in the direction of helping us become healthier people, instead of allowing them to lure us into harmful and unhealthy behavior.